bit about Matt Brash. So, Chris, we've heard so much about him and, from other pitchers like Ryan Rowland-Smith and, from Pete Woodworth about, how special he is. And he's got some really sort of interesting movement on his off-speed pitches, things like that. But tell us what your impression is of Matt and what you're working on with him.
Sure. So, the known things obviously are, I think you could pretty realistically say his slider is maybe the best pitch in terms of pitch movement and velocity in Major League history. I actually think it's that absurd how good the stuff of that pitch is. And the curveball is obviously pretty darn good too. It's got a little more depth, so it can kind of be the another option for left-handed hitters. And then really the fastball, in my estimation at least, the biggest thing it has going for it is just it's thrown extremely hard. But the movement profile, at least last year on it, wasn't necessarily great. So it was difficult without elite command, which he just doesn't have, and that's okay, to really get results as a starter with the pitch. And then even out of the bullpen, really his results were a lot better when he went to those breaking pitches. So the number one thing was really getting him something that can kind of merge that gap between this disgusting slider that guys are going to be kind of resistant to swinging the bat at times. And his stuff is really just too nasty to be reliant on guys kind of standing there holding the bat in their shoulder. And really, when he started, guys just didn't swing at anything, whether it was in the zone, out of the zone. So they really made him work to land those breaking balls. Those pitches can honestly be pretty difficult to command. And then when he went to a fastball, it really doesn't have the movement profile where you can just kind of throw it down the middle and get away with it. So the cutter was kind of the big thing development-wise that he's been working on, that he's been throwing over there. And really, it's kind of the pitch that is right in the middle of those other two pitches where there's a fastball, a breaking ball with some incredible movement that's mainly swing and miss. You just need something in between to kind of basically force him to swing the bat at something that's not a fastball. That's really the main purpose of it.
Well, and Chris, you said something about command and that you weren't worried about that or something. Is that because that's something you feel like you can fix? It's not going to be a problem?
So the command really is probably the biggest issue with his talents overall. And then when you match that with the pitch shapes he throws, the slider and the curveball, especially when you talk about it from a starting pitcher context, and I know we've got the information on him kind of coming out of the pen for the time being and whatnot, but it's just very difficult to command those two pitches, regardless, really, of how good your command is at a base level. And then when Matt's, just to be honest, his command as a starter was a bit below average. I think the best way to develop his ability to start and to get better results out of the bullpen is to just throw a pitch that kind of leans into a little bit of cut, which would basically be the cutter rather than throwing a big breaking ball. And basically the hitter has to stand up there, and he's got three pitch shapes he has to worry about now. And if you throw a four-seamer 98 down the middle or a cutter at 94 or a slider at 88, it gives you the ability to not necessarily have to command any of those individual pitches great because there's so much guessing there. You can kind of get away with throwing each of those pitches over the radius of the strike zone.
As far as Brash goes, the news was he's working on a cutter. You guys are working on that with him. We saw some video that looks crazy. How developed was it when he got there? Was it developed at all, or was he coming in with, hey, I really want to perfect this thing? Take us through that particular pitch.
Yeah, so he hadn't really, my understanding, thrown it at all. And looking at his break plots, I don't know. Maybe he tried it in a bullpen or something. But when he came in, basically Matt Festa actually came in probably about 2 months prior, just during the season, to kind of talk a little bit. And then he was, to be honest, I talked to Festa a bit about it. I put out a tweet, kind of tried to hunt down Brash a bit, so to speak. It eventually got to him, and then Festa kind of maybe nudged him last second there. But, yeah, the main thing was just he's never thrown a pitch like this before, right? So he's so used to seeing that slider move about 15 inches. You got to find a grip. Brash has very unusual fingers. Also, finding a pitch grip for him, it was kind of difficult because the way he grips the ball is just so niche compared to every single other player that I've worked with. So that took a decent amount of time. And to be frank, the first day didn't go that well. He was kind of backing him up, and he couldn't find a grip that he liked. And then he came back 2 days later, basically during his assessment, And that's basically where we saw, hey, you threw about 15 of these and, 11 of them were acceptable. 2 of them were good. And at that point, you kind of just keep hammering it down for the rest of the off season. And you kind of he gets familiar with what the pitch is, the purpose of the pitch is. It's not meant to strike out guys like his slider necessarily. And he's able then to lock in the movement a bit better throughout that time.
When you talk about his fingers, are you talking about the grip itself, or does he have odd fingers?
His middle finger, he can hook the ball. It's nothing. The only other guys I can think of is maybe Alex Cobb. He's with the Giants, and Marcus Stroman. But he has his middle finger. I don't even know really how to explain it, but he can grip the ball, and I think it's why he spins it so darn well. And he can just apply force to the ball forever. And the more I think about it, the more difficult it's going to be to be able to describe over the radio. He can do things with that middle finger that probably explains why he can throw a slider like he can, because he can just impart force to that ball almost forever. It seems like. And when you see the ball come out of his hand on our Edgertronic cameras, it just can make it. Basically, you can see it slows down the ball, or it slows down the pitch out of the hand, so you can see what's happening. It seems like that's been sticking on there for a super long time. It allows him to apply force through that baseball on the outer side of it and throw that wicked slider. And then he kind of does the same thing with that cutter now. It's not necessarily as sexy on a pitch model per se, but I think it certainly is better than his four-seamer and will complement his four-seamer a lot. A good comp on Luis Castillo, he got all kinds of whiffs with his four-seam fastball, and his four-seamer is basically the same as Matt's. The difference is Luis throws a sinker with it, and to be frank, his sinker is kind of the pitch that people see on the report, I think, a lot of the times. And when you're balancing those two pitch shapes, that can then make your four-seamer play up above what its current potential is. So that's another benefit of that.